Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. We have started our stream. Good morning for the people from the Netherlands. Selamat siang for those joining us from Indonesia. We have two collaborations in research to present to you today, this morning, this afternoon. One between Institut Teknologi Bandung in Indonesia and the University of Twente in the Netherlands, and the other between Universitas Gadjah Mada and University of Groningen, also in the Netherlands. My name is Tim Zwaagstra. I work for the University of Groningen, and I am the moderator for today's session. We will talk about the general topic of winner as the innovation for the Sustainable Development Goals. Our particular SDGs are number 8, economic growth, number 10, inequalities, number 11, sustainable cities, and we join that under the theme of social and economic rural-urban inequalities in the context of sustainable development. Our first session today will be presented by Professor Ronald Holzhacker, professor at the University of Groningen, Professor Bobby Setiawan, professor at Universitas Gadjah Mada, and Mr. Martin Drent, who is a PhD candidate in the University of Groningen. The topic will be rural-urban corridors, about the interplay between the city and the outlying regions. We will present examples from the Bandung region as well as the region of the new capital city of Indonesia. And for our second stream, we will move to the cooperation between ITB and Twente, and they will talk about rural smartness business ecosystems. The presenters will be Professor Maria Jacob of the University of Twente, Mr. Iqbal Mukti, who is a PhD candidate at the University of Twente and is an alumnus of ITB, and Mr. Setiaji, the head of communications of the Information Agency of West Java Provincial Government. At the moment, Mr. Setiaji is still speaking in another session, but he will join us in time. Unfortunately, our proposed discussant, Bu Rajes from ITB, is having connectivity problems. We hope she will be able to join, but otherwise we will improvise on the Q&A session. For that Q&A session, please write your questions in the comments. Our moderator will make sure that they get to us. We will select them and we will address them. And it's important to note that we will have our sessions first and that we will have the Q&A after. That's it from me for now. You will see me again later, but first we turn to the first stream to Professor Ronald Holzhacker, Professor Bobby Setiawan, and Mr. Martin Drent. Yes, please start the presentation for that screen.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to all of you in Indonesia. The title of my talk is about the possibilities and visions for sustainable corridor development in Indonesia, uniting the Sustainable Development Goals and the climate change agendas. Next week starts the COP26 in Glasgow, and what we're interested in doing, this is a idea research that Bobi Situan at Gajah Mada and I have been developing over the past couple of years. If we could put up the slides, please. Okay, next slide, please. This is part of our Groningen Research Center for Southeast Asia and ASEAN. Next slide, please. So our overall question is how best to plan, design, and govern sustainable urban transformation integrated into a broader ecosystem and development corridor in times of rapid climate change. So we're talking about uniting urban and rural areas in a corridor. You could go on to the next slide, please. Here's a number of different corridors we're going to be speaking about, especially today, the Jakarta-Bandung corridor, and also in Kalimantan and the new capital region. Okay, next slide, please. You know, when we began to think about this topic, we looked into the existing literature about corridors, and it's very focused on economic development and tends to focus on large infrastructural projects. For example, the high-speed rail between Jakarta and Bandung, or the Trans-Sumatra Highway. But our idea is you can think of corridors not just in terms of economic growth, economic efficiency, but also delivering on key SDGs. For example, how do you distribute health resources from doctors to clinics to hospitals to unite urban and rural areas, or educational opportunities where you want schools for young children close to the neighborhood, perhaps within walking distance, but then tertiary education universities that are reachable from your home. Okay, next slide, please. Just some background, the high-speed rail being completed now between Jakarta and Bandung. Next slide, please. The Trans-Sumatra Highway. Next slide, please. So what we're interested in is thinking about how these corridors can better serve attaining the SDGs by 2030. Okay, next slide. You know, when we look at the Indonesia's voluntary national review for the SDGs and the setting of particular targets, one of the things we noticed is there isn't a lot of discussion about how the provinces and cities need to be involved in these goals. A lot of these projects have to be implemented at the provincial and local level. So we are interested in that multi-level governance and the coordination between levels. Okay, next slide, please. We see this, for example, in the planning at the national level, and the main challenge being ensuring inclusive growth and shared prosperity for all. So this attempt to link economic development, economic progress with the idea of leaving no one behind. Okay, next slide, please. We also see this planning related to the SDGs at the provincial level. But what we're interested here is there's also national goals in terms of climate change. But of course, provinces and cities need one plan. So they need to look for synergies between these two international agendas. Okay, next slide, please. So once again, a lot of the current research has been from economists and is focused on corridors as economic development. You go to the next slide, we'll spend a little more time here. So whereas the previous literature has emphasized corridors connecting economic agents, we talk about corridors connecting people with diverse needs, social, economic, environment, climate. existing literature has emphasized how economic geography can serve economic integration. We say you can also look in terms of spatial planning, also in terms of meeting the SDG goals, in terms of healthcare, educational opportunities along the corridor. Most of the literature talks about corridors in terms of increasing economic competitiveness. We say let's view corridors more widely in terms of reducing inequality and improving access to health and education. Okay, next slide. So we're talking about various SDGs here. There's a lot of focus on SDG 11 on sustainable cities, but we're interested then in the connection to the surrounding rural areas in order to meet the broader goals of a province or the national government in terms of things like healthcare and education. Okay, next slide, please. A lot of this has to do with linking international commitments. So, for example, the international climate change agreements to the nationally determined commitments, the NDCs, to reduce greenhouse emissions, and how we move from the Sustainable Development Goals, the global 2030 agenda, with national action plans. But what we want to do is move from the level of policy to how these are implemented in practice. Okay, next slide, please. Bobby will also talk a little bit more about the new urban agenda that's also quite connected in terms of housing policy with our approach. Okay, next slide, please, and the next slide. I want to put this graph up to talk about how we are trying to unite these debates about climate, the environment, and the economy in terms of sustainable cities. That's the scientific inquiry, but match that with these societal aspirations of equal access, poverty reduction, food security, the urban, rural. Martin Drent, the final speaker of our first session, will be talking about water security, which also has to do both in terms of fresh water and sanitation, but of course food security and water for agriculture. Okay, next slide, please. And the next slide. Okay, so this is sort of an overview of sort of some of the different corridors that we are interested in looking at over the course of our research. And I'll turn it over to Bobby. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. My slide, please. Next slide. Well, to continue Ron's principle or concept on how to see corridor development, not only from economic point of view, but more in a comprehensive way in terms of sustainable development. So my concern and my interest is to see what is going to happen when the idealistic idea of the new capital of Indonesia is located in a very, environmentally sensitive island, the third largest island in the world, which is Borneo or Kalimantan. So my talk today will be to see the challenge of the sustainable development of the corridor development and the new capital of Indonesia, which already now decided by Indonesian government. Next, please. Kalimantan, Borneo, the third largest island in the world. People are always talking about the heart of Borneo, which serving very important, environmental services, not only for Indonesia, for the region, for even for the whole global planet. But the question will be how then the Kalimantan in the future, when the new capital of Indonesia will be located there, in which at least 1 to 2 million people will be reside in the new capital. And more importantly is that the new capital will be located in between 100-kilometer corridor linking between Balikpapan and Samarinda in the east of Kalimantan. Very interesting, and that's actually my concern. But with and without the new capital, I think more and more attention should be given by Indonesian government to the Kalimantan, because Kalimantan really will become an important consideration for the whole sustainability of not only Indonesia, but only for the whole planet. See some of the figures of the environmental characteristic of Kalimantan, for example, the third largest island in the world. Yeah, there are at least 94,000 square kilometer of pit swim area, for example. Kalimantan is also in the heart of Borneo, where a hot spot for the global planet, so it's already under pressure, with mining, coal mining, the palm oil exploitation a lot in Kalimantan. That's Kalimantan, and very much geopolitically strategic for Indonesia. That's why also when the government selected Kalimantan as the new capital for Indonesia. Next, please. This show, the geopolitics of Kalimantan, which is very important, and that's why also the government of Indonesia choose the Kalimantan, especially the East Kalimantan, as the new capital to be able to play in a much broader geopolitical of the Indonesia and the rest of the world. Next, please. You may already know about the idea of the new capital for Indonesia, but it was started actually long time ago, 1945, as part of the Bung Karno ideas, the founders of the nation. But some people are criticizing that Jokowi is using that idea to develop Jokowi legacy, because Jokowi will run until 2024. That's why people are criticizing the decision to start building IKN, the new capital, is not only for the whole Indonesia, but also for the individual interest of the Jokowi to develop Jokowi legacy. This is interesting to discuss. But well, of course, that idea create pro and cons of the plan. But the important question that, because the decision already made, the main important for us as observer, of course, is the question on whether a new capital of Indonesia in Kalimantan is create a problems or solution, and whether the IKN, the new capital, become opportunity or even constraint for sustaining Kalimantan and even the whole Indonesia and the rest of the world. Next, please. This is some figure about the new capital. 1 to 2 million people will move to that area, and at least 400,000, hectare of land when be converted into the new capital. Of course, they use the government use the term smart sustainable cities. But of course, we have to see that idea into a much broader context, not only in terms of corridor development linking Samarinda, Balikpapan, and the new capital, but also the rest of the Kalimantan. Give you some idea. For example, now still 45% of the people in Kalimantan is urbanized. So the idea of urban-rural transformation is also important. The question later whether the IKN will perpetuate the rate of urbanization and whether the IKN will really provide a more equality between rural, a better link between rural and urban area, or will be develop a more gap between rural and urban in the Kalimantan, East Kalimantan, and even the rest of Kalimantan. Next, please. This is the idea, and this is part of actually our idea to develop integrate smart and sustainable corridor. capitalizing opportunity of the new Indonesian capital, supporting by sustainable energy and agro-industry. That is the idea. But of course, continue monitoring is important to make sure whether the IKN, the new capital development and stages are really meeting the SDG and the whole idea of sustainable development. Next, please. So in brief, what I'm going to say is the questioning whether the new capital should be seen within a broader regional development corridor, and how to make sure that the new IKN, the capital, can create a sustainable development, and not only in Kalimantan, but in the whole Indonesia. Yeah. In this context, some suggestions should be, for example, important very much to develop strategic environmental assessment, and then also environmental safeguard for the whole stages of the development of the IKN. More comprehensive and detailed studies, assessment are needed, because so far what we are hearing is just policy program development, but not enough studies done and exposed to the public on that plan. And then, of course, important for policy research, for academicians to develop or to use that idea for a research agenda, continuing research agenda at the local, national, even global academics, to continue explore, to continue monitoring, and to continue study the implementation of the plan for the sake of development, not only for Indonesia, but also for the rest of the world. Thank you very much. Ron?
Thank you.
Well, good morning and good afternoon. My name is Martin Drent, and I'm focusing on the hydrosocial cycle of the water system of the Bandung metropolitan area. Next slide, please. So my presentation will first focus on how the SDGs and climate change are relevant. Then I will explain my theoretical perspective of the hydrosocial cycle. Then I will go into the case of Bandung, the implications of my study for urban-rural areas, and then my conclusion. Next slide, please. So climate change is a problem for Southeast Asia, which has been consistently pointed out by the IPCC. For Indonesia, it will have various consequences, such as sea level rise, extreme weather events, and especially the water sector will be affected by things such as prolonged droughts, as this will decrease the availability and quality of fresh water. And droughts will also affect rice production in Indonesia, which can endanger the food security. So vulnerable communities will be more affected by climate change because they often live in flood-prone areas and they often lack essential urban services. Another question is how climate change will affect Indonesia's target of 100% access to drinking water and to sanitation and zero slums. So next slide, please. So in my study, I applied the theoretical concept of the hydrosocial cycle. This is defined as a social natural process by which water and society make and remake each other over space and time. It's based on the idea that water cannot be separated from its social context, and the concept has been used to study how water is produced through social and political processes and how water shapes social structures, relations, and identities. So specifically, when water is regulated, such as through irrigation systems, it can lead to stability. But on the other hand, a dramatic flood event can disrupt the lives of communities. So the diagram shows that water changes society, which leads to infrastructure and technology that can change the flow of water. And examples are the building of dams or purifying water to make it safe for drinking. Next slide, please. My case study is Bandung, the metropolitan area. This is an interesting case because it's the city of Bandung is surrounded by various cities and regencies and mountainous areas. The region faces various interrelated water problems, such as water pollution, from the Citarum River, which is caused by agricultural waste upstream, industrial waste, trash that is thrown in the river, and domestic wastewater that's untreated and also flows into the river. The city also faces inequality in access to water, as many people cannot access piped water, and therefore they pump groundwater, and as well as industries, which causes groundwater depletion and also land subsidence. Urbanization puts further pressure on water as it increases the demands for water, while developments also lead to the land conversion of built-up areas. So I use the hydrosocial cycle as a tool to uncover the underlying drivers behind these problems. Next slide, please. So my analysis of hydrosocial relations in Bandung has various implications for rural areas. So first, there are striking differences in access to water and sanitation in Bandung. Many poor, informal, and low areas, they have no access to piped water or only have access to water at night. Bandung also still has informal settlements on riverbanks that have no access to sanitation, and while a lack of waste management causes water pollution through the untreated discharge of wastewater in the rivers. Local governments and PDAM, they lack the financial resources and struggle to expand surface coverage, while urbanization leads to more demand for water. And there are also a range of sub-districts in the low-lying areas of the metropolitan area, such as Baleenda, that face yearly flooding. Many local residents claim that flooding has been more serious in recent years. And during the dry season, water reservoirs tend to dry up, which decreases the availability of raw water, and thereby also decreasing the water that PDAM can distribute through the city. So droughts especially affect rural hilly areas, which have no pipe water connections, and so they are more vulnerable to a decrease in water debit. So this also reduces water for irrigation, and in some years droughts have even affected 1,000 hectares of paddy fields in Bandung regions. Yeah, I'll move to the next slide. So reflecting on the wider topic of the session, the situation in the Bandung area has various implications for the future of the Jakarta-Bandung corridor from the perspective of sustainable development goals and climate change. First, it's important to control the development to protect water resources. This is needed to ensure the availability of water in the future, especially when climate change can lead to prolonged dry seasons. And it's also important to learn from the situation in Jabodetabek, because in the 1960s, Jakarta's master plan envisioned a green belt around the city to separate it from the surrounding cities, but now the whole area has become one extended urban area. And lastly, to ensure the sustainability of the Jakarta-Bandung corridor, there's a need for effective governance between different levels of government and between neighboring cities and regencies. And it's crucial to consider the interests of various parties, such as the power of private developers, to ensure that economic development does not stand in the way of achieving the sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Yes, thank you everyone from stream 1. I think also looking at the time, we can move to stream 2, please.
Can you move one slide back? Yes, hello everyone. My name is Maria Jacob. I'm going to talk about our collaboration between University of Twente and Technology Institute of Bandung, ITB. Our project is focusing on the unbalance between urban and rural development in the West Java province. In particular, we are aiming at slowing down the migration between rural areas and urban areas. We hope that with facilitating the diffusion of new IT technologies and in general, the development of rural smartness, we can achieve a better balance between rural and urban development, and we can improve the welfare of rural population in this province. Next slide, please. So my role in this stream is to give you a bit of overview of our research, and we organized our research according to the so-called theory of change. What you see on this slide is actually the core of this theory. On the left side, you see a problem analysis. On the right side, you see the societal impact that we aim to achieve with our research, and below you will see the research activities we are planning. And for this specific project, the problem area we are addressing is actually urbanization and reduction of rural-urban migration. This is leading to our main research objective that is could be summarized in terms of using IT to solve this social problem. And for that, we are using design science research to create the design of a so-called rural platform. The result of this design exercise is the architecture, the IT architecture of such a rural platform that offers various types of services to rural populations, and in particular to small entrepreneurs in rural areas. And with services, I mean e-commerce services, but also supply services, financial services, and other types of information. And also here, part of the research is the formulation of a general theory of rural smartness that would, allow us to understand the mechanisms that govern the relationship between IT development and the acceleration of economic development, and finally, the improvement of welfare in rural areas. So now you see on the sides of this core theory of change also the exact concrete steps we are taking in our research. So we start with the urban rural economic gap. We hope to reduce this gap by IT innovation. And on the impact side, we will, the artifacts that we are producing, research artifacts, namely the Rural Smartness platform and our theory of rural smartness, will be actually implemented in the form of a platform. The implementation is ongoing currently, and we hope to be able to observe rural economy improvement in the coming period. Next, please. So I will now give you a bit more details on both sides, the problem analysis and the impact side of the theory of change. So in West Java, why we locate our research in the West Java province, and you might ask yourselves why. Well, in our opinion, West Java fits perfectly the profile of let's say, large gap between rural and urban areas. It's also the most densely populated province in Indonesia with about 50 million inhabitants. We have 27 large municipalities, among which Bandung, which counts the metropolitan area of Bandung, counts about 11 million people. And these numbers you see here on this slide will give you a good idea about the difference between rural and urban in West Java, with 5,000 villages and a rural surface much larger than the urban surface. You will see that the concentration of population in urban areas, about 70%, is much higher than in rural areas. But on the other hand, rural areas are confronted with poverty. So about 10% of the population lives under poverty line, which is much higher than what happens in the rural areas. You will see also that the Gini ratio is worse for West Java, which means that the distance between the poor and the very rich is really high. And all these numbers, they do not include Jakarta, which is on the border of this province. If we would add Jakarta to the picture, the numbers would be even worse. So that's why we see that West Java is confronted with this rapid urbanization. Can you move to the next slide? And that creates serious issues on both sides, both rural and urban. On the rural side, we have a high poverty rate, as you have seen, but also we observe that the young people that have the actual workforce are moving to cities, and the rural area is left with rather old people to work the fields and to actually take care of the rural economy. On the urban areas, as you've seen also in the previous presentation, infrastructures are confronted with a lot of pressure because of this rapid growth in population. So no clean water, lots of traffic jams, slums, pollution. These are all typical issues that you will see in areas like Bandung or Jakarta. So this is bad for both parts of the province, rural and urban. Can you move to the next slide? So with our research, what we hope to achieve is the following. First of all, as I said, if we are to use IT innovation and to facilitate the diffusion of IT within rural areas, then we hope to decrease the speed of this rural-urban migration. And the way the province government is doing this is to organize this effort of IT innovation into three, let's say, main activities. First of all, to lie down a proper basic internet infrastructure and IT infrastructure to take care of the digital education and literacy of the population in rural areas, and finally to implement rural smartness in the form of this kind of IT platforms that are very accessible to the population in rural areas, with also with the hope that these platforms will lead to a more intense entrepreneurial activities, will give access to faster access to a larger market for rural products, and will contribute to awareness about the touristic attractions, about the economic potential of rural areas. And by doing this, eventually this IT innovation will lead to a better and more improved situation of the rural economy and welfare of the rural population. So this is very short our story. And next I will give the floor to our PhD student, our main researcher, Iqbal Mukti. He is going to tell you in detail about the different research activities that he carried out so far in this process.
Yeah, thank you, Maria, for a very nice presentation. I will continue. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as Maria said, that our approach to improve rural economy and to narrow the urban-rural economic gap is by embracing IT innovation under the umbrella of rural smartness that will explain later. So the main assumption is that by fostering IT innovation in rural area will lead to the emergence of better local economic climate that will improve innovativeness and competitiveness in rural business ecosystem. And at the end, we expect to improve the rural citizen economic welfare. And this project is relevant with the SDG number 10, which is inequalities, SDG number 8, the economic growth, and SDG number 11. Next slide, please. Yeah, so as I mentioned, our approach to improve rural economy is under the umbrella of rural smartness. So this is the definition of rural smartness and its characteristic based on systematic literature review with hundreds of articles. So yeah, from this definition, we can see that rural smartness is related with the diffusion of IT innovation in rural areas. But IT innovation by itself is not sufficient. IT innovation needs to achieve its goal, which is to improve rural economic welfare, and need to fulfill its characteristic. We derive this four characteristic of rural smartness. First is digitally empowered citizens, where rural citizens are empowered in their business and economic activities. Second is connectedness, where rural businesses are able to connect with their related stakeholders. For example, rural businesses with its market, with financial institution, with the government, and connectivity among rural businesses itself. Third is participatory governance, where initiative toward improvement of rural economy is not only the responsibility solely from the government, but also need to be in a participative nature with third party and also the citizen. And the last one is coherence, where the provision of IT services in rural area need to be coherent or aligned with the actual needs of people in rural areas. Next slide, please. Then, in order to realize rural smartness, we try to understand the social artifact, namely the determinant of rural smartness, or in other words, what are the readiness required in order to realize those characteristics of rural smartness we mentioned earlier, and what is actually the impact of rural smartness in the social structure in rural areas. So first, in order to realize rural smartness, the initiative should be driven by the government. So we did this study and developed this theoretical model based on a real data from a survey in West Java. So first, to realize rural smartness, the initiative should be driven by the government. This is because initiative for rural development is not economically attractive for private sector. And the government, the readiness of the government will lead to the readiness of technology as well as environment. And the readiness of the government includes the funding availability, capability in terms of IT, a commitment to support, and ability to collaborate with the stakeholders. And West Java government is already prepared for this organizational readiness, where the West Java government already established Jabar Digital Service or West Java Digital Service, and rolling out the program called Digital Village Program. So organizational readiness already there in West Java. And then it will lead to technological readiness, where the internet connectivities are in place, the IT services are in place, IT devices, electricity, and IT strategic guideline is in place. And then it will lead to environmental readiness, because having the required technological element or IT in rural area is not sufficient, it's not guarantee to realize the characteristic of rural smartness. It needs to be embraced by the citizens as well as by the third party, by the related third party. And once these readiness are in place, we expect to realize those characteristics of rural smartness I mentioned earlier, and it expect to improve innovativeness. That includes improve collaboration, improve value creation process, and entrepreneurship. And in turn, it will lead to improve competitiveness, increase in market access, productivity, and improve efficiency. And at the end, we expect to improve the rural citizen economic welfare in terms of income and employment. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. Once we understand that those characteristics of rural smartness justified from the survey will lead to improve rural economic climate, we translate those characteristics into an IT artifact in form of a digital platform. So in the study, we designed a reference architecture of this platform that include boxes, shape, and lines, but we didn't put it here because it's too detailed. But in summary, we designed a digital platform that has these following functionalities. So first, the platform will digitize rural offerings, like products and services in rural areas. And then the information of those offerings will be shared to digital business ecosystem. So we embrace the service-oriented architecture approach for this purpose. So we then share information about rural offerings to the online marketplaces to improve their market access. In practical, this includes exchanging information with online marketplace like Bukalapak, Tokopedia, and so on. And also we exchanging information with a financial institution to enable finance for rural and also promotion. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is just to give you illustration on what we develop. So this is the screenshot where a product from rural digitized and shared into marketplaces. Next. This is how rural businesses could get funding from financial institution. Next slide, please. And these are for the promotion, where information about rural attraction are being shared with tourism portal like TripAdvisor, Traveloka, and etc. Next slide, please. Next. Yeah, those screenshot and study are study research output, and we want to rolling out this into a real platform, and we are doing that in close collaboration with West Java. So we already developed a team for the development in collaboration with private sector, and we now currently doing this pilot project with rural businesses and village-owned enterprises from West Java, and we will launch this in 10th of November 2021, our target date, for the soft launch of the actual platform. So actually we translate the research output into the actual platform. So next slide, please. Yeah, this is the screenshot of the actual platform where we already synchronized with Tokopedia and Shopee. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is the last slide. Pastiaji will explain this part where collaborative approach taken by the local government. And we far from end from this collaboration because we are just getting started, right, Pastiaji? And Pastiaji will explain this part. And hopefully we can explore a further collaboration with West Java. Please, Pastiaji.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Iqbal, and also Maria. Yeah.
Next slide,
Mas Iqbal already present about what our doing in the West Java. Yeah, this is the aspect what I will say the power of the collaborations. Yeah. As you know, the government cannot run by itself. Yeah. We need some party to join to solve the problems. So this is what we call the pentahelix, ABCGM. The academic, thank you for the University of Twente, especially for Maria, already approved this initiative, and also from the LPDP, and also the business partners, like a Schema is also our important partners, because they develop the application and also make this application happens. And the next thing is about the government itself. Yeah, we with the others institution like the local institutions, the local government, etc., and then also the media. How we communicate with the media, the public. This is a very important thing. And also the next thing is community, like small medium enterprise and etc. So yeah, we believe with this initiative, we can collaborate more, not only in this issue but also in other issue. We believe with this collaboration like a pentahelix, we will make this happen to solve the problem in West Java, not only in the rural area but also maybe in urban area. Okay, thank you, Pak Iqbal.
I think we can have more in this discussion about this. But to sum up, that research collaboration, illustrate that the partnership between Dutch University, LPDP as a funding of this research, and the industry, in this case West Java governments, could be work, and this approach could contribute to solve local problems with global best practices provided by Dutch University. And we encourage next for LPDP to arrange this type of collaboration from the very beginning of PhD by research scholarship, especially in the Netherlands. I think time is running out, so perhaps we can go straight into the discussion section. Back to Tim.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Iqbal. We have come to the end of two very interesting sets of presentations. In the meantime, we have been monitoring the comments for questions. And without further ado, I'd like to bring those center stage. We have an interesting question from Ms. Anissa Indrarini, and she asks about the impact of the COVID pandemic. It's a very general question, but I think we can interpret it as what would be the contributions of the things we have been talking about today in recovering from the COVID pandemic. Ron, can I ask you to respond first?
Yes, thank you, Anissa, for this very relevant and current question. And I think, one of the impacts that the COVID epidemic has caused is, many people now are not commuting from their home into the center cities, so that they are, working at home, but still need to be productive and connected online. So the idea of smart cities and rural areas also having connectivity to the internet becomes even more important, so that those livelihoods can be sustained. And, all of our big, transport projects, there's less people, moving into the center cities, so that there is a decentralization of the economic activity. And I think that's the opportunity to move more of the life of people closer to home. So there's more time spent with a family and getting exercise, and less of these very long commutes that, of course, have really made Jakarta and the surrounding area a difficult place for a lot of people to live. So I think that's really having an impact on the economy and the way people live. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. I'd like to move to a question by Yuda Prombudia. She has a specific question for, he has a specific question for Stream 2. He says that full adoption of technology is a lengthy process. So what might you say about the short-term impact of what you are proposing? Maria, Iqbal, Pasitiaji, who would like to chime in on this one?
Yeah, thank you, Payuda, for the question. I think this is a very good question and relevant for rural areas. First of all, yeah, rural community largely have a low digital literacy. That's why they kind of difficult, to catch up with digital innovation, right? But first, this is related also with the COVID pandemic effect, where people somehow push toward a digital ecosystem. So we have one effect. So COVID is undesirable, but somehow it push people to be more open toward technology, right? And the second, how to increase their willingness to use IT innovation in rural areas. So there are several answers to this, but largely related to education. So in this aspect, West Java government have this program in collaboration with Patriot Desa program to improve digital literacy for people in rural areas. And the West Java government, also Pasaji can explain this more, collaborating with third parties to improve digital literacy for people in rural area. Pastiaji, you want to add something to this?
Yeah, actually, when we talk about the rural area, we have the 3 stages. First, the first level is when the villages there is no internet connection, so we provide first the internet connection, and then the second level is after we provide the connection, the internet access, we do like digital literate and also teach them how to use the technology for the positive way. Because as you know, after they got the technology, after they got the communication, usually they use this for the negative ways. So we need this to make sure after we give them some technology, some internet connection, they use this for productive way. And then the next thing is the last level is how we improve the capacity, the skill, them to use the newest technology like IoT and then the e-commerce and etc. So that's the how we improve the villages in the West Java. Thank you.
I would like to intervene a bit and add a few things. First of all, thank you for the question, Yuda. It is true that IT adoption is a lengthy process, but you should see this a little bit more nuanced, in the sense that not all IT is adopted slowly. So if you think about mobile technology, it went pretty fast because it depends on the level of complexity and the effort that people have to put in using such technology. If you deal with complex technology like artificial intelligence or very sophisticated types of software, then I understand that there is a problem with timing. So the process will be lengthy. But if you talk about a technology that is very clear and people see immediately the advantage of using it and having it, then the adoption process is quite short. So I think situations like COVID even increased the speed of adoption of such technology. So it helps to use mobile internet and to offer this kind of services online in the country, in the rural areas, to improve economic activities and help people survive isolation and all kinds of problems they have due to COVID, for instance. So yeah, I would say on the short term, depends on the complexity of technology. You can have a very rapid adoption. On the long term, yeah, if you go beyond simple technology, well, then you have to do more about adoption. That's it.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you all. And thank you, Yuda, especially for a good question. The next question is by Mr. Agung Jauhari, and he is asking about the sustainability of urbanization in the perspective of the different role and function of rural and urban areas and the environmental degradation that we see in that context. Prof. Bobby, I think you could give an answer to this one. Bobby, are you hearing us? Is there a connection problem, Bobby? I think we should move to a next. Sorry?
Can you hear my voice?
Now I can hear you. Yes, please.
Okay. Well, I think in that context, to answer the question, the new urban agenda, an elaboration of SDG number 11 may answer question on how to make sure that urbanization can be done in inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable way. And that's really our challenge, you know. In the case of Indonesia, I think the government, especially in this context, the Bappenas and also the Cipta Karya, the Public Works Agency, also supported that idea. Start from very simple goals of achieving basic services like 100 clean water, 0 slum area, and 100 sanitation. That's very, very, very basic, yeah. But in the future, we would like to make sure that urbanization in Indonesia can be in the can be in an inclusive, resilient, safe, and sustainable way. Of course, we have to be more positive in that context. At the same time, also because in the and when you talk, for example, about spatial planning, yes, of course, spatial planning can really guide sustainable urbanization, but as far as we can ensure the law enforcement, because some of the aspect of the good management in Indonesia is also not supported by with a good law enforcement. So we need to increase law enforcement, yeah, and make sure that spatial planning is implemented correctly.
I also had
Ron, please.
I also had a comment that I wanted to link this question to some of Martin's work. And it seems to me, you know, the hydrosocial cycle emphasizes how important it is to think about the water catchment area that is serving, you know, fresh drinking water to the cities. And, you know, one of the, I think, strategies of making sure that this is preserved and doesn't get contaminated and growth doesn't go too much into those catchment areas is that areas in or near the catchment area can also serve as recreational opportunities for the people in urban areas. So these water catchment areas are very important in this urban-rural relationship. Martin, maybe you can say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think that's also a good point. Like in Bandung, like Lembang, which is a bit north of Bandung, it's a really important tourist area, and so if that area can see, like, the tourists come for the beautiful area, and if all of Lembang will get redeveloped, then I think they will probably also lose the tourists. So it's good to see that it's in their interest also to preserve their areas.
Thank you.
Martin, before we close the session, I'd like you to quickly address two more questions. One is on the irrigation practices by farmers and how, let's say, education into more sustainable systems should take place. Can you talk about that from the perspective of the hydrosocial context cycle? And could you look at the question that our Mas Iqbal asked about the connection between research and impact?
Yes, of course. Well, thank you for your interesting questions. I think the Dutch situation is a bit different. That I don't think the irrigation system is degrading so much in Holland. It's more that setting the level of the groundwater. At the moment in Holland, it's more about flushing the water out. And with climate change, it needs to be raised, but then farmers need to, they can't start farming early in the in spring. So, but then in summer, they need to, at the moment, they can't spray water because of drought. So it's important to see for farmers the interest that they have there. If they allow the raising of the water, then they will have a benefit. So I think in Indonesia, it's also important to not just how do you say it? In Holland, the situation is a lot about strong regulations and law enforcement, and in Indonesia, that's you can't rely on that. So it's important to emphasize the personal interest that farmers have. So I think it's important to use local leadership, such as village heads and through Kelompok Tani, to educate people about what's in it for them and what's going to be the consequences if they don't maintain their irrigation systems. And I think it's already possible to point out like droughts, so they can already see what happens in their life. And then the question about how to translate the research output to ensure the societal impact can be realized. So I think it would be too easy to make a recommendation that plans should just happen as designated or laws should just be enforced. Well, we hope that, but that's not realistic. So it's important to have a deeper understanding of the underlying drivers of why land conversion happens, why pollution happens, and then you can develop more context-specific regulations, such as educating the farmers upstream of safe practices, so at least there won't be any agricultural waste in the rivers. That's my answer.
Yeah, and thank you for your answer. Pak Setiaji, if I may, since you are like a consumer of the research output of your partners in Twente, could you speak to the impact this is creating in your own assignment?
Yeah, actually we have what we call the villages in the development index. Yeah, we divide into 5, the growth villages, and then also the what we call the less development of the villages. Yeah, we hope that every villages already done for the what we call the improvement of the villages. Yeah, after we collaborate with this initiative, actually we have some impact like that for the highest development index in the villages. And then the next thing is we attract the people, especially for the youth people, to come back to the villages because already have the big opportunity in the villages. Before the villages, there is no opportunity, only the farmers and etc. Now we can use the technology and also the IoT and etc. in the villages. I think this is the impact we can attract back for the youth people to coming back to the villages.
Thank you, Patiaji. It's encouraging to hear that what the universities in faraway Netherlands are producing is meaningful in your context. Looking at the time, I'm going to move to our conclusion and wrap up. I'd like to use one final question by Margreet van Til as a context for that. Her question is, what's the definition of a village in West Java? I find that a lot of villages are built alongside the main roads. They have all the problems of the cities, but not the benefits of the cities. I believe that in the presentations you heard today, you have heard some of the instruments that are trying to address that imbalance, that they are trying to improve the effectiveness and the productivity and the usefulness of cities, of rural areas, I'm sorry, and the connectivity between them, both in the example we have heard from Groningen and UGM, the corridors, as well as the smart infrastructure that is being implemented in West Java through the cooperation of Twente, ITB, and the government of West Java. I think that's all we have time for, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to also move to the other sessions. Thank you all very much. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to Meta backstage, who managed everything for us today. And I wish you a good continuation of the conference. Thank you all, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Keep healthy, important now.
Yes, exactly.